As military airplanes got better before and during the Second World War, some really cool designs came about, as well as some pretty scary ones. They're always trying to figure a way to get ahead of their opponents. It was often scary how much freedom countries gave their smartest people when it came to ideas and prototypes. Some of them even made it into mass production. The Blohm and Voss 141 was a very strange plane. It was made to be a tactical surveillance plane. In 1937, the German Air Ministry put out a request for Reconnaissance plane, the one seat that would be the best at spotting things. Germany was making plans to quickly take over more land in Europe. Its current fleet of scouting and observation planes were good for now, but they wouldn't be fast or far enough to cover the huge areas of European countryside that the army planned to quickly take over. Arado with the AR-198 was chosen as the best contractor, but the prototype didn't work out because it was too slow and unstable on all directions at those low speeds. Finally, Fock and Wulf won the FW-189, which might seem a little strange since their production of a twin-boom design with only two small engines didn't follow the rules set by the German Air Ministry. Blohm and Voss worked on a secret project to make something much more radical, and that they did. A lot of the time, symmetry is a high priority when building an airplane. This is for a number of obvious reasons, including keeping the aerodynamic forces even across the body, keeping the plane stable, and making it easy to build and then keep up. It was clear that the chief designer, Dr. Richard Vogt, wasn't there when these easy important points were brought up, since the BV-141's most notable feature was its totally uneven structure. Despite what it might look like, balance was a big part of making this plane. In a normal airplane, the pilots don't have a good view because the big noisy engine and the wings make it hard for them to see. This can make takeoff and landing very dangerous in some planes. The engine would, of course, make a lot of power, which, depending on how quickly the propellers turned, would make the plane lean to the left or right when it was on the ground or in the air. Another problem was that the engine was in the middle of the vehicle. Circular air moving quickly around the propeller is pushed back towards the tail and rudder surfaces, which didn't always work as planned when conditions weren't right. Another reason why a lot of aircraft builders looked at pusher propeller ideas around this time was to solve this problem. The design by Blohm and Voss tried to get around these problems by making an asymmetrical design that would work and handle equally well on both sides. This idea was sent by Vogt to the Air Ministry, but Arado had already started building the AR-198, which looked good at the time. So, at first, the Air Ministry wasn't very interested in Blohm and Voss's strange ideas. But Ernst Udet, who had just been named chief of the development section, told Vogt to keep going, and on February 25, 1938, the BV-141 prototype, which was named HA-141, took off. It was found that the unusual plane didn't have many problems and was easy to fly. The only exceptions were some control surfaces that were too sensitive and some slight oscillations in the undercarriage. Then, Ernst Udet flew the prototype himself, and after that, a formal order was made for 3 more. In the beginning, the contract did not cover the existing prototype. However, after a long time of talks between BV and the Air Ministry, it was finally agreed that the machine could be one of the 3 that were hired. 2 fixed forward-firing 7.9mm machine guns and 2 handheld rear guns of the same caliber were planned. But the BV-141 V3 prototype was the first plane to actually have set weaponry. Underwing racks were also put in place to hold 4 110-pound bombs, so the 141 could also be used for bombing missions. There were 3 people on board, a captain, an observer, and a gunner in the back. The crown-shaped plexiglass gondola on the wing was home to all of them. The second prototype, BV-141V1, weighed 6,812 pounds when it was empty and 8,441 pounds when it was fully loaded. It started flight tests in September 1938. As soon as this test program began, issues with the plane's hydraulic systems were found that led to a bad situation in which, on the 5th of October 1938, the prototype BV-141 had to land in a farmer's field without warning, with the main wheel legs only half extended. It wasn't a soft landing, and the starboard wing took a lot of damage. I'm sure the owner of the field that was ploughed wasn't too happy either. The V3 prototype was ready to go in the flight test program, which was great, so there was no need to wait longer for this review to be completed. The V3's body was made longer, and the wingspan was made wider to make it more stable. Also, the wheel track was widened from 16 feet 1 inch to 16 feet and 10 inches to make the ground more stable. The crew was moved around. The observer was sitting to starboard, and the pilot was sitting to port in the crew cabin. The observer's seat was connected to a track that let them move forward and backwards. This let the observer use both the forward bomb sight and the radio gear that was placed behind the ship, so that they wouldn't be left alone. The observer also ran a reconnaissance camera and, in a battle situation, would also run the upper aft firing machine gun whilst inside a plexiglass coffin that was almost completely open. There was no way to describe the crew room as large. It was 4 feet 11 inches tall and 3 feet 11 inches wide. At the back, it ended in a pointed coat covering for one of the machine guns that could be turned 360 degrees. While the gunner would have a good view of everything behind, above and below him, he would be lying on his back over the trailing edge of the wing. The German Air Ministry had been very skeptical about the BV-141 from the start, but they had to admit that despite its very strange design, the plane handled very well and met all of the original requirements set out in their contract. With some extra money saved up, they made an order for 5 pre-series planes. Even though this was being done, the prototypes still had a problem with the hydraulic system that wouldn't go away. In this case, the prototype V4 had an accident when it came to landing because one of the landing gears stayed in the locked up position. The plane was badly damaged. Because this prototype was meant to be tested at the Luftwaffe testing ground in Rechling, the official start of the elevation program had to be pushed back. Like planned, the last 4 pre-series planes were finished on time. The official flight tests of the BV-141 V5 were finished at Rechling in January 1940. Most of the pilot reports were positive. For bombing at a low level, a special bomb sight was built and put in, and 13 bomb tests were carried out. 58 bombs were being dropped from different heights. The BV-141 would not be made in big numbers, which is a shame. Even though some tests showed promise, the Luftwaffe High Command wasn't very interested in this strange aircraft, and on April 4, 1940, they were able to get the ministry to drop its plans to make a lot of BV-141As. There were only 20 of these strange planes ever made. 3 prototypes and 5 BV-141As were built for the first production run, but they didn't meet their design standards because their engines weren't powerful enough. 12 BV-141Bs were also built, but their engines were more powerful BMW 801 radio engines. It was too late though. The German Air Ministry had already started making the Focke-Wulf 189, and the new Focke-Wulf 190 fighters needed the BMW engines very badly. Another problem was that Blohm and Voss's factories were only used to make other planes like the Focke-Wulf 200 Condor, because the Allies had brutally bombed Focke-Wulf's factories.